There is a new development in the Nolan Wells investigation today. And this time, the development is not another theory from social media, another disputed interpretation of an audio recording, or another question about what may have happened on Horn Island. It is about Nolan Wells' phone. Today, August 17th, Nolan's family and their legal team say they are ready for a joint forensic examination of his cell phone, with experts from both sides potentially participating. The family has asked the Jackson County District Attorney's Office to select a date between August 18th and August 21 for that examination. And according to the family's attorneys, the possibility of FBI participation has also been discussed. But there is another major development today. The NAACP has now joined the legal efforts surrounding Nolan Wells' death, working alongside the Wells family and civil rights attorney Ben Crump in the push for answers and greater transparency. That changes the significance of this investigation, because we are no longer simply asking what happened to Nolan. We are asking whether the evidence already sitting inside a device connected to his final hours can help establish a timeline. And that brings us to the question at the center of this video. What could Nolan Wells' phone potentially reveal if forensic experts finally get the opportunity to examine it properly? Could deleted photographs matter? Could deleted messages matter? Could location information matter? Could the phone help establish what happened during the critical hours before Nolan disappeared? And perhaps most importantly, can a phone tell investigators something that witnesses cannot? Today, we're going to examine exactly what digital forensic investigators can and cannot recover from a cell phone, what is publicly known about Nolan's phone, and why the phone could become one of the most important pieces of evidence in this investigation. But before we go any further, one important distinction. There is currently no public confirmation that investigators have recovered a deleted message, photograph, location record, or other piece of deleted data from Nolan's phone that proves what happened to him. That is important, because this case has generated enormous speculation online. Our job here is different. We are going to separate what is documented from what is possible. And when it comes to Nolan Wells, that distinction matters. Sent. The phone that came back without Nolan. Nolan Wells was 18 years old when he traveled to Horn Island, Mississippi, during the July 4th weekend. He went there with friends. He did not return home with them. His body was discovered on July 6th. Authorities initially considered drowning as a possibility and have said there were no initial signs of foul play. But an independent autopsy commissioned by Nolan's family later determined that the cause and manner of death were undetermined, leaving important questions unresolved. And then there is the phone. According to reporting, Nolan's cell phone was later recovered from one of the people who had been with him. That phone has become a major point of interest because investigators and the family could potentially use it to establish information about Nolan's activities before his disappearance. But as of today, the phone has not undergone the joint forensic examination that the family and authorities previously discussed. That is why today's development is so significant. The Wells family says it is ready. Their experts are on standby. And the family has requested that the joint examination take place this week. The agreement for a joint examination was reportedly reached in July, but the examination has not yet occurred. So now we have a very simple question. What happens when investigators finally examine the phone? To understand that, we need to understand something that is often misunderstood. Deleted does not always mean gone. When an ordinary person deletes a photograph from a phone, they usually think the photograph has disappeared. And from the normal user interface, it may appear that way. You tap delete. The photograph disappears. You delete a message. The conversation appears to disappear. You clear your browser history. The list is gone. But digital storage doesn't necessarily work like a piece of paper being thrown into a fire. Deleting information does not automatically mean every trace of that information has instantly ceased to exist. depending on the device, operating system, application, encryption, storage architecture, and circumstances surrounding the deletion. Forensic specialists may sometimes be able to recover remnants or related records, and sometimes they may not. That second part is extremely important, because there is a dangerous misconception online that federal investigators can simply take any phone, press a button, and recover every deleted message ever sent. That's not how digital forensics works. There are limitations. Encryption can make recovery extremely difficult. New data can overwrite previously deleted information. Some applications store information primarily in the cloud. Some records may exist only temporarily. Some information may be inaccessible even with sophisticated forensic tools, and some deleted material may simply be unrecoverable. So when we ask whether Nolan's phone could contain a ghost, we're not talking about a magical file hiding somewhere inside the device. We're talking about digital traces, and those traces can sometimes be incredibly valuable. What could forensics look for? Imagine investigators receive Nolan's phone for a proper forensic examination. They would not simply scroll through his photographs. A professional forensic examination can involve creating a forensic image of the device and analyzing its contents while preserving the original evidence as much as possible. Experts could potentially examine things such as photographs, videos, messages, application data, contacts, call records, browser information, location-related records, device activity, and other artifacts associated with applications and the operating system. The exact information available depends heavily on the device and its condition, and that is why the forensic process matters. Investigators aren't simply asking, "What can we see?" They're also asking, "What can we establish?" Those are two very different questions. Suppose a photograph appears to have been deleted. The question isn't automatically, "Can we get the photograph back?" The better question is, are there remaining artifacts that can establish that the photograph existed, when it was created, when it was modified, where it may have originated, or how the device interacted with it? Sometimes the answer may be yes. Sometimes it may be no. And sometimes the most valuable evidence isn't the deleted file itself. It could be the surrounding metadata or related activity. The digital timeline. This is where Nolan Wells' phone becomes particularly interesting, because this investigation is fundamentally a timeline problem. There are questions surrounding what happened on July 4th. There are questions about Nolan's final known movements. There are questions about when the boat left Horn Island. There are questions about when Nolan was last seen. There are questions about when people realized he was not coming back. And there are questions about when he was officially reported missing. A newly released recording from July 4th captured a call from the boat to a private towing company at approximately 4 p.m. as the boat experienced trouble. Other reporting has placed the boat's departure from the island at approximately 4:31 p.m., while a recent report compiled by the United Cajun Navy identified the period surrounding Nolan's last reported sighting and the boat's departure as a critical unresolved portion of the timeline. That report itself cautioned that some of its material was not verified law enforcement evidence, and this is exactly where we have to be careful. We should not turn an unresolved period into an accusation. A gap in a timeline does not automatically mean a crime occurred during that gap. But a gap does mean investigators have something to explain, and digital evidence can sometimes help. Imagine, hypothetically, investigators could establish that Nolan's phone interacted with a particular cellular network at a certain time. Then, minutes later, another application recorded activity. Then another digital artifact appeared. Then the device stopped communicating. None of those things alone would necessarily tell us what happened. But together, they could potentially help investigators construct a chronology. And that is the power of digital evidence. It doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. It can help narrow the story. For example, investigators could potentially compare phone activity against known witness statements, boat movements, emergency calls, photographs, video, surveillance footage, marine records, and other evidence. If all of those sources agree, investigators gain confidence in the timeline. If they contradict one another, investigators have a new question, and that is why Nolan's phone matters. Not because it is guaranteed to solve the case, but because it could potentially provide an independent digital timeline against which other accounts can be tested. Line. What about the deleted data? This is where the public conversation becomes especially interesting. Reporting has raised questions about deleted material associated with Nolan's phone, including photographs and Snapchat-related information. But we have to make an important distinction. A report that deleted data exists does not automatically tell us who deleted it, when it was deleted, why it was deleted, or what the deleted material contained. Those are separate questions. And those questions are precisely why a forensic examination matters. Imagine investigators discover that a particular file was deleted. The next questions would be, when was it created? When was it deleted? Was it deleted manually? Was it automatically removed by an application? Was it synchronized somewhere else? Was there a cloud copy? Was there a thumbnail? Was there a database entry? Was there another device involved? Could the application itself provide timestamps? And perhaps the biggest question, can the information be independently authenticated? Because investigators aren't simply looking for something interesting. They're looking for evidence that can survive scrutiny. Suck. The Snapchat question. Social media applications create another layer of complexity. An application may show one thing to a user, while the underlying device contains different records. A message may disappear from the visible conversation, but leave some associated information elsewhere. A photograph might be saved to a device, transmitted through an application, backed up, cached, or referenced by a database. But again, none of this means investigators can automatically reconstruct an entire conversation. Modern applications are designed with privacy and security features. Encryption, cloud architecture, and disappearing message systems can limit what remains on a device. And investigators may need information from the service provider rather than simply the physical phone. That means the phone may only be one part of a larger digital investigation. The phone may not be the only digital witness. This is one of the most important points in the entire case. If investigators want to understand Nolan's final hours, they don't necessarily have to rely on Nolan's phone alone. Digital evidence can come from multiple sources: other people's phones, cloud accounts, application servers, cellular network records, location services, photographs taken by other people, messages sent to other devices, social media activity, boat electronics, navigation equipment, security cameras, and emergency communications. The challenge is connecting all of those pieces. Think of it like reconstructing a puzzle. Nolan's phone could represent one piece. The sea tow recording could represent another. The boat's movements could represent another. Witness statements could represent another. And video footage could represent another. The objective is not to make one piece fit a predetermined theory. The objective is to determine whether all the pieces can fit together. 9DI, the sea tow audio. And that brings us back to the audio. A recording from the boat made around 4 p.m. on July 4th was released publicly and has generated enormous discussion online. People have listened to the recording repeatedly, trying to determine what they hear in the background. Some online listeners have claimed they hear references to Nolan, but forensic audio experts have warned that poor quality recordings can easily produce misinterpretations. especially when listeners already expect to hear a particular phrase. One expert who reviewed the issue stressed that proper analysis should begin with the original, uncompressed recording, rather than internet-enhanced versions. That lesson applies to the phone, too. Because there is a temptation in cases like this to find the answer first and then search the evidence for confirmation. Professional investigators have to do the opposite. They examine the evidence first, then they determine what it supports. Knock. And now, the NAACP has entered the case. Today's development goes beyond the phone. The NAACP's Office of General Counsel has announced that it is joining the legal effort surrounding Nolan Wells' death. The organization says it will work alongside the Wells family and its legal team, including Ben Crump, as the effort for answers and transparency continues. This is significant because the NAACP had already publicly called for urgency and transparency in the investigation. Now its national legal arm is joining the effort, and this comes at a moment when the family is also pushing for a federal review. The Congressional Black Caucus has urged the Department of Justice to independently review the circumstances surrounding Nolan's disappearance and death. So the case is expanding beyond a local investigation. But again, that does not mean federal authorities have determined that a crime occurred. It means outside scrutiny, and calls for transparency are increasing. Those are different things. Why the phone and the NAACP development are connected. At first glance, these might appear to be two separate stories. One is about civil rights advocacy. The other is about digital evidence. But they intersect around one fundamental issue: transparency. If the phone is examined jointly by experts representing both sides, the examination could potentially provide answers about what data exists on the device. And if experts disagree about what the data means, that disagreement can itself be documented. That is much better than relying on social media screenshots and competing narratives. The goal should be reproducible evidence. Evidence that different experts can examine. Evidence that can be challenged. Evidence that can either support or weaken a particular timeline. What would a forensic examination actually need to answer? There are several questions I believe will be worth watching as this process develops. First, was Nolan's phone physically functioning during the relevant period? Second, what data remains on the device? Third, are there deleted artifacts that can be recovered or reconstructed? Fourth, what timestamps can be independently verified? Fifth, does the phone contain location-related information that can help establish movement? Sixth, are there application records that clarify when Nolan interacted with the device? Seventh, does the device contain evidence that can be compared with information from other phones? And eighth, does the digital timeline agree with the accounts already provided to investigators? That last question may be the most important, because digital evidence is powerful precisely when it can be compared against independent evidence. But there is another possibility. What if the phone doesn't solve anything? That's possible, and we have to say that. The examination could reveal very little. The phone could have been inactive. Important data could be encrypted. Deleted information could be unrecoverable. Location records might be too imprecise to establish a person's exact position, or the available evidence could simply confirm information investigators already know. That would not mean the forensic examination failed. Sometimes evidence is valuable because it eliminates possibilities. If a particular theory predicts that the phone should contain certain activity and the forensic examination shows that it doesn't, investigators may need to reconsider that theory. That's what evidence is supposed to do. Comparing the digital approach to other investigations. In major investigations across the United States, digital evidence has increasingly become part of the reconstruction process. But there is an important lesson from those cases. Investigators rarely rely on one device alone. They compare digital information with physical evidence, witness statements, surveillance, financial records, communications, and other sources. That's because phones can tell investigators what a device did. They don't automatically tell investigators why a person did something. A location record might show that a device was near a particular place. It doesn't automatically prove who was holding the phone. A message might show communication between two people. It doesn't automatically establish the truthfulness of what was written. A deleted photograph might be recovered. That doesn't automatically prove what happened in the surrounding moments. This is why digital forensics is powerful, but not magical. It provides another layer of evidence. The biggest question. Who had the phone? And this is where the Nolan Wells investigation becomes especially complicated. Because investigators aren't simply interested in what Nolan's phone contains. They also need to establish the chain of custody and the circumstances under which the device moved from one person to another. If a phone was left somewhere, investigators would want to know who had access to it. When was it recovered? Was it powered on? Was it connected to another network? Was it handled before forensic preservation? Were applications opened? Was anything changed? Was the device reset? Was it connected to a computer? Every one of those questions can potentially affect the interpretation of digital evidence. That's why a controlled forensic examination is so important. The longer a device remains outside a controlled evidence environment, the more questions investigators may have to answer about its condition. The timeline we know. So let's step back. On July 4th, Nolan traveled to Horn Island with friends. A boat carrying members of the group later experienced trouble, and a call was made to Sea Tow at approximately 4 p.m. Nolan did not return with the group. He was reported missing that night. The search intensified the following day. And on July 6th, his body was discovered in the water near Horn Island. Since then, questions have continued surrounding his final hours. The independent autopsy commissioned by his family did not determine a cause or manner of death. The family retained Ben Crump. The Congressional Black Caucus called for federal review. Now, the NAACP's Office of General Counsel has joined the family's legal effort. And the phone, which has been a major source of questions, is finally moving toward a potential joint forensic examination. That is the development we need to watch. Whipperbus, August 18 through August 21. As of today, the Wells family's legal team says it has requested that the examination occur between Tuesday, August 18 and Friday, August 21. The family says its experts are ready. And according to the family's legal team, the possibility of FBI participation remains on the table. That means the coming days could become extremely important. Not because we know what the phone contains. We don't. But because for the first time, there is a clearly identified path toward determining what the device can actually tell investigators. And that is much more meaningful than speculation. Time. What could change after the examination? Imagine forensic experts discover that the phone contains previously unknown digital artifacts. That could generate new questions. Perhaps investigators find a timestamp that helps narrow down a particular period. Perhaps they find communication that clarifies someone's account. Perhaps location-related evidence becomes available. Or perhaps nothing significant is found. Every one of those outcomes would be informative. But there is another possibility. The phone could contradict part of the existing timeline. And if that happens, investigators would have to determine why. Was the original timeline wrong? Was the digital information misunderstood? Was the device being used by someone else? Was the timestamp generated by an application rather than the phone's actual clock? These are precisely the kinds of questions forensic experts are trained to investigate. Don't let the internet solve the phone before the experts do. This case has already shown how quickly online speculation can spread. We've seen people analyze audio clips. We've seen photographs debated. We've seen timelines reconstructed by internet users. We've seen claims repeated until they begin to sound like established facts. But repetition does not turn a theory into evidence. If a forensic expert says a file was deleted at a particular time, that's evidence. If an investigator establishes that a device connected to a network at a particular time, that's evidence. If a witness says something happened, that's testimony. If a social media account claims something happened, that's a claim. Those categories should never be mixed together. And that's especially important in the Nolan Wells investigation because real people are involved. The investigation is ongoing. The cause and manner of death remain unresolved publicly. And several people connected to the case have faced intense public scrutiny. So the responsible question isn't, who did it? The responsible question is, what can the evidence actually establish? The ghost in the phone. And maybe that's what makes this phone so fascinating. A phone can be silent. It doesn't testify. It doesn't explain itself, but it can leave traces. A timestamp, a connection, a file, a database entry, a location record, a photograph, a message, or sometimes the absence of expected activity. And if investigators can establish that those digital traces are authentic and properly preserved, they can become another witness to the timeline. Not a human witness, a digital one. That's why the title of this investigation could be The Ghost in the Phone. Not because we know a secret is hiding inside Nolan Wells' cell phone, but because there may be digital traces of moments that nobody has yet been able to fully explain. And now, the question is whether forensic experts will finally be able to examine those traces. The most important thing to watch next. So here's what I will be watching very closely over the next several days. First, will the joint forensic examination actually take place? Second, who will participate in the examination? Third, will federal forensic experts become involved? Fourth, will investigators publicly describe what categories of data were recovered? Fifth, will the examination establish any previously unknown timeline information? And sixth, will the digital evidence support or challenge the accounts already provided about Nolan's final hours? Those are the questions that matter. Not whether someone on TikTok thinks they heard a particular word in an audio recording. Not whether an anonymous account has created another theory. And not whether a photograph looks suspicious. The phone has the potential to provide something much more valuable. Verifiable digital evidence. Final. Today, the Nolan Wells investigation has entered another important phase. The NAACP has now joined the legal effort alongside Nolan's family and Ben Crump. The family says it is ready for a joint forensic examination of Nolan's phone. The requested window is August 18 through August 21, and the possibility of federal forensic participation has been raised. At the same time, calls for an independent federal review continue to grow. But we still don't know what the phone will reveal. We don't know whether deleted information can be recovered. We don't know whether the device contains a decisive clue. And we don't know whether the digital evidence will ultimately confirm or challenge anything investigators currently believe. What we do know is that Nolan's phone represents one of the clearest opportunities to test the timeline against something other than human memory. And in a case where the timeline remains one of the biggest unanswered questions, that matters. Because eventually, theories have to give way to evidence. And if there really is a missing piece inside Nolan Wells' digital footprint, the forensic examination may be the process that finally determines whether that piece can be found. The question isn't whether the internet can solve the phone. The question is whether trained forensic experts can determine what the phone can actually prove. And that is what we should be watching next. If you want the latest developments in the Nolan Wells investigation as they happen, subscribe to Brian Case Records, because this case is still developing, And the next forensic update could change what we understand about Nolan's final hours. And if you believe this investigation deserves continued attention, share this video so more people can follow the facts as they develop. Nolan Wells' family is still looking for answers. And now, with the NAACP joining the legal effort and the phone potentially moving toward forensic examination, the next chapter of this investigation may be one of the most important yet. This is Brian Case Records. We will continue following the evidence,